Right now, you can buy a Ferrari V12 for the price of a used family car. Some of them are quietly doubling people's money, and some of them will bleed you dry. They're impossible to sell, they're very expensive to own, and they're going nowhere. The problem is, from the outside, they look exactly the same. They have the same Ferrari badge, they have the same 12 cylinders, they're from the same era, but the market treats them completely differently. There's a pattern that decides which is which. Four different factors that determine which side of this equation this car is on. I pulled real sold examples of these cars so that I can show you these factors, and by the end of this video you'll be able to look at any cheap V12 car and know if it's going to make you money or lose you money. Many of these V12s have similar engines, they have similar performance levels, they have the same Ferrari icon or badge, so the same prestige on the street. They even have the same manual transmission, but for some reason collectors are chasing some models and avoiding other ones. So there's clearly a reason behind this other than raw metrics. I've narrowed down the factors that affect these models' prices to 5 different things. First off is the driving experience. This is the manual versus automatic. Obviously manuals cost more money, but that's not the only thing, you know, there's also hydraulic steering versus electric steering. Things that make the driver feel like they're connected to the road directly. There's no middleman. Next up is the historical significance. This can be something like, this was the first car with this engine, or the last car with this beloved engine, or the first car that had this feature. Things like that really affect how collectors see the car. Next is the design legacy. This is things like the Pininfarina design, how the car actually looks like from the outside, if it's coherent with the car's image. This is a bit vague when you're looking at a car, but it does make a difference if you know where to look. Next up is meaningful rarity. This simply means how many of this specific model were made. This does not just mean how many 550 Maranellos were made. No, it means how many 550 Maranellos were made that were also manuals. This really affects the price within one model. Last, and this doesn't really apply to all cars, is provenance and originality. Basically, a specific color, a specific model. Maybe this car was in Europe or Australia, and for that reason, its price is slightly higher. This also affects price. Also, if the engine has been replaced or fixed at some point during the car's history. Let me show you some examples so you know how this works. Let's start with the 456 GT. Genuinely one of the most beautiful cars of its era, you know, Pininfarina design, it's a V12 engine, a grand touring car, genuinely a very nice car, but for 20 years, people were just calling it a cheap Ferrari. It's a genuinely powerful car, but nobody wanted it. Now, why is that? Here's the first clue. It came as a manual and as an automatic. The manual was selling for, or now is selling for $83,000, and the automatic is for $52,000. So the manual option does command a premium. But here's the thing I want you to understand, and it's the point of this entire video. Manual alone does give you a premium, but it doesn't shoot up the price as much as you'd expect. So the car being a manual definitely matters, but it doesn't make it a legend, right? It's still a cheap car, $83,000. Something else has to be there for the car's price to jump $100,000, $200,000, right? Hold that thought, because the next car is going to prove exactly what I'm talking about. Now, the next example is the 612 Scaglietti. Now, when this car first came out, people viewed it as too large, too luxurious. It wasn't really viewed as a raw Ferrari V12. Collectors didn't want it back then, but for some reason, after 20 years of its price decreasing, its price is starting to slowly recover. What could possibly cause collectors to change their minds about this car? Now, I'm not saying that all variants of this car have recovered in price. I mean, the F1 paddles, the automatic, is still $85,000, but the manual variant is $240,000. So why is the car being a manual creating such a huge difference on the 612 Scaglietti compared to the 456? I mean, it's just automatic versus manual, right? I mean, in the 456, the manual created a premium of around $30,000, but in the 612 Scaglietti, the manual premium is around $150,000. Why is there a 5x difference in the manual premium? That doesn't make any sense. The reason is the manual transmission isn't the only thing creating this price gap. It's simply just the trigger. The different factors at play are rarity. Only 199 out of 2,400 Scagliettis are manuals. So this is two different factors latched onto one another, the manual and the rarity. That's why the gap is greater. And there's also another factor that I haven't mentioned at the start, the story. This car was rejected when it first came out, and people always love an underdog. They like seeing someone who was down in the dirt get up, become famous, become well known. And this is what the Scaglietti has done. The manual versions, at least. Again, the manual transmission was just a trigger. What amplified the premium was the rarity. Now, the next example is the 599 GTB Fiorano. The most obvious value driver in this car is its historical significance, its heritage, if you will. It has a direct lineage to the Enzo Ferrari, the engines are similar. This is the most obvious sign there is that this car is going to be valuable. But what if we look a little deeper? This car basically has all of the factors I mentioned at the start. I like to call them value drivers. Historical anchoring, only 30 manuals are out there in the entire world. 30. That's rarity plus driving experience, aka manual driving, Pininfarina design, aesthetic, and in this example it's red. That makes it more valuable. What do you think will happen when we combine all these factors? What do you think is going to happen to the price? You know, once we have the manual trigger, what do you think is going to be the difference between an automatic car and a manual car? Simply put, the manual premium becomes more pronounced. An automatic 599 with the F1 paddles is $150,000 today. A manual 599 is $750,000 plus. I've attached screenshots here of both variants with sold prices. These cars have been sold recently. This automatic was in July 2026. The latest one I could find for the manual was in 2024. But if one sells soon, I'm guessing it's going to be more than $800,000, maybe $850,000. There's one listed here for $810,000. So I want you to realize what we've seen here, the trend we've seen. The manual is simply a trigger for all the factors that drive up the price of the car. The historical significance, the rarity, the provenance or rare colors, all of these build up the tension, but then the manual comes in and actually changes the price. But having a manual by itself without them creates what, a $30,000 premium? I want to show you one last example, and this one's really going to cement my point about these value drivers being the main thing and then the manual transmission just cementing the price premium. The 550 Maranello, it was a return to the front engine V12 two-seater, so this is historical significance, that's one. It was manual only, okay, manual only, keep it in mind. And a nice Pininfarina design. Manual only, Daytona hair, Pininfarina design, but there were 3,000 units made. Now, despite it not having all of the factors that I've mentioned, the factors that were present did drive up the price. Let me show you. This is classic.com. I recommend you go to this website if you're looking at any collector cars. In 2015, this car was $2014, this car was $81,000. And today, the average is $180,000. This is a 2x. Cool, nice, we'll take it. But what if we go even deeper? What if all of these factors are present? What would happen then? So the 550 Barchetta Pininfarina, similar to the 550 Maranello, but only 448 were made. This was a special version of the 550 Maranello. It was slightly more expensive at launch, but a trivial increase in price, right, compared to what we're about to see now. In 2014, this car was selling for $386,000 on average. Today, it sells for $550,000. So this just goes to show how much rarity matters. 3,000 units sold, you got a 2x from 80,000 to 160,000. 500 units sold, you go from 386 in 2014 to 550,000. These value drivers are real. It's not just about the manual transmission. If there's one thing I'd leave you with today is that getting the fastest Ferrari of its era does not make it the most valuable. Getting the rarest Ferrari in its era does not make it the most valuable. What matters is how many value drivers can you stack up? The four or five things I mentioned at the start of the video. Historical significance, the rarity, the manual transmission, and the whole driving experience, hydraulic steering, and in some cases, the radio, right? In some cases. The design legacy and the originality or colors, rare colors, if the engine has been replaced, these things all matter, all of them, not just one thing. If you only have a few drivers, maybe one or two drivers, it stays cheap. You've seen this in the 456, just showed it to you. If most of the drivers align, you get a nice appreciation like the 550 Maranello. And if there's one massive driver like we've seen in the 612 Scaglietti, the 30 cars worldwide, then you get a massive shoot up in price, right? Because only 30 were made. And when that's there, the manual premium goes crazy. It was like $600,000 for the manual premium, just because the other factors were there. If you can learn to count these value drivers, if you can spot them on any car, on any listing, then you have everything you need to figure out if the car you're looking at is going to go up in price or going to go down in price, if it's going to make you money or lose you money. If this changed the way you look at Ferrari values, subscribe, because the same signals exist on Porsche, Lamborghini, BMW, Aston Martin, and almost every collector market out there.